Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, taking a look at my video here. As always, I appreciate it very much. So I do have the round 21 game for you between Wesley and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, taken from the Paris Rapid and Blitz. For all of my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you, kamusta na. You know, Masaya Kong Makita King Moody. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, taking a look at my stuff. For anybody who is coming from France, you know, I would say bonjour. You know, comment ça va? Ça me fait plaisir de te voir, mes amis. Merci beaucoup. And it is breakfast time, so I'm a Tayo, and all my people in French. Bon petit déjeuner. Appreciate you guys very much for everybody coming by. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got knight to f3, we got c5, c4, knight to f6, knight to c3, knight to c6. So we do have the English opening symmetrical, the four knights variation. I bet you cannot guess why it's called four knights. Nah, I'm playing. You know, you guys see these knights right here, man. Four knights on the board. So there's a lot of different openings that, you know, when you pretty much have three knights or four knights or something, you know, they'll call it 3 or 4 knights. So it's pretty simple, So we got d4, pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. We got e coming in. We got e6, a3. You know, we don't want any bishop to b4 situations coming because that can be kind of annoying. We got bishop coming to c5. We see knight down to b3. We got bishop back to e7, and then we do see e4. So we kind of have like a little Rxc8 bind setup going on a little bit here, you know. Trying to make sure that, you know, we don't want, you know, when black is playing like d5, you know, they're trying to free up their pieces, you know, especially this bishop back here. And they're trying to make their own claim in the center. So c4, e4 is just trying to like put a complete lockdown on the situation and make it be very, very unappetizing to play. So we do see castles by black. We have bishop to e2. We got b6, castles, bishop coming to b7. We see bishop to e3. We got rook over to c8, and then we have f4. And as you guys can see, you know, white is in a pretty nice position. They do have these 3 pawns here, so they do command a lot of space in the center. And so, you know, they are doing considerably better. This is actually a really, really nice position for white. You know, white definitely has the advantage. And as Yasser Sirawan would say, it's white for choice. So, you know, f4 just grabbing as much space as possible. You know, we might want to swing the queen over here a little at some point. You know, maybe put a rook lift on. You know, see if we can back this knight up somewhere. And it could get pretty dicey. So we see d6 by black. We got rook over to c1, queen comes to c7, and then we do see bishop to f3, which, you know, does put this bishop on a really nice diagonal. Now, if we just back up one move, though, after queen to c7, an idea that the computer really liked was queen to e1, and then after knight came back to d7, we saw queen to g3, kind of something what I mentioned earlier, you know, just shifting some focus over here to this king side. You know, we got these pawns rolling, so, you know, we can cause some havoc, and, you know, these bishops are going to be pretty nice. So, I mean, you know, something that could have occurred. But we do see bishop to f3. We see rook f to d8. And we have knight to d5. Now, knight to d5 looks really pretty. Because you're thinking, okay, man, if we got some exchanges, we take back with the pawn. We're pinning this, you know, this rook to this queen. And it does end up being a little beneficial for white. So let's take a look and see what it looks like. So we got pawn takes d5, pawn takes d5. Queen sidestep into d7. You do get your pawn with pawn takes c6. Bishop takes c6. And then we see queen to d4. And yes, black has kind of damaged their structure just a touch. But this wasn't what we saw in the game coming up. But this was actually a very, very strong idea in the position. What we actually saw in the game was d5. So that allows white to play e5. We see knight down to e4. And we see knight f to d1. And as you guys can see, you know, white is doing pretty good. You know, they're not under any type of stress. You know, they're doing a good job blocking this pawn from moving because, you know, d pawns can be pretty dynamic. But if we do back up to once we saw queen to d4, it was very highly suggested that black go queen to b7. And queen to b7 is just asking a real question to this pawn here on e4. As you guys can see, you know, all 3 of these pieces are coming and converging to attack it. And it's really, really hard to defend. If you did try to defend with something like knight to d2, you would be seeing d5. And the main problem that you have is your queen is opposite this rook. So there's not really a lot of, there's not a really good answer. So after you were to try to close the position with e5, you would actually see bishop to c5. And as you guys can see, this position here is much more dominating for black than what we actually saw in the game. You know, after this position here, you know, this position here, white is doing a lot better. So, you know, we got queen over to e6. We see h3. We got h5 by black. We got queen down to d3. Bishop coming back to b7, and then we do see knight to d4. And as you guys can see, this position has started to develop pretty nicely for white. You know, they have their knight in a nice central position. I mean, black does too, but you know, these bishops are in there. We do have you know, the queen in a good spot. We are blocking this pawn, so that's important. And you know, this knight is doing a really good job in the center of the board doing some attack. So it's starting to push black back a little bit. So we see queen back to f7. We see rook takes c8, rook takes c8. We see g4. And then we do see g6. You don't necessarily want to go ahead and take because you can either take back with the pawn or the bishop, and you're going to be hitting this rook. And it can get just even more dicey for black. So we do see g6. Pawn takes f5, pawn takes f5. And this is giving white quite a bit. You have king coming to h2, and you're going to be taking full advantage of this open g file. So the king is sidestepping as well. So we do see rook taking over the g file. We see rook to g8 because we cannot have that as black. So we do see rook takes g8, king takes g8, and then we now see queen coming to b5. Now, something I'm gonna mention about this position is every piece is like really ideally placed. You know, this knight is very ideally placed. You know, these bishops are doing a really good job of, you know, just kind of defending, you know, entry points, making sure that we don't get, you know, any queen penetration going on, stuff like that. And we are fully supporting this pass pawn here on the e file. So the queen isn't really placed the best on the d3 square. It's pretty much done its job. So it's like now it's time to go look for what else the queen can do. And queen to b5 is something really nice, you know, because you are threatening to come up here, you know, with the queen, try to infiltrate, you know, try to knock this bishop a little bit, you know, especially if the bishop tries to back up. You know, you got queen c8 checks coming. So, you know, it's just a lot more active square for it to be on than d3. So we got bishop down to c5. And this is kind of a crucial point in the game. We do see b4 by white. You know, this just encourages the trade on d4. So we see bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4. And that's not bad. I mean, white still definitely has a nice advantage. But a really nice after bishop to c5, kind of a little in-between move was actually, not that. It's actually e6. And e6 is just asking a real question to this queen. You're taking advantage of the fact that you can push this pawn right now. And so what you're most likely going to see is queen to e7. And then you have queen coming up to d7. And this is just crazy active. You're not really too much worried about this bishop being here. You know, this bishop is coming here intending to trade anyway. So b4 is kind of a wasted move for white. You know, it's pretty much encouraging black to do something that they're already doing. So you have to be careful when you're playing your games. If you are playing, if you are attacking a piece that literally wanted to move anyway, you're really not doing anything with that particular attacking move. You're just basically helping your opponent do what they were already trying to do. So that's just something there. So we do see bishop takes d4, and then we have king over to f8. We see queen down to e2. We got queen to g6, and then we have queen to e1. And the thing that I'm mentioning about the situation, because we did see b4 coming, the position that you saw before was much more attacking for white. And in this position, it's interesting how like one move can be the difference between you either attacking or defending. And you see that now white is defending the position instead of doing the attacking that they would have been able to do a little bit before. So, you know, it's crazy like when you're looking at moves and stuff like that and you're thinking like, you know, what's the difference between these two moves? Sometimes a move that you're considering might be a move that's going to put you in a defensive position. It could be a move that's going to put you in an offensive attacking position. And as human beings, you know, computers can literally differentiate between these two perfectly. But as human beings, sometimes it's hard for us to, you know, figure out which one is better in different positions. So that's just our human nature being that. So, you know, it's kind of a situation where you might look at a position and be like, oh, I think I'm doing okay. And the computer says, no, you're dead lost. And you're like, what? Or just, you know, the computer might say, oh, you're just completely winning. And you're just thinking that you're, I mean, there's even a position that Viswanathan Anand resigned in and he was actually winning. So, I mean, no human is, you know, exempt from miscalculating a situation. So we got queen over to h6. We see queen to c1, you know, defending that f4 pawn. We see queen over to g8. Now we see queen to g1. You know, it's starting to get annoying for white. So white is saying, hey, man, I think I just need to go ahead and just trade queens. We see queen taking g1, king taking g1. We see bishop to c6. We see bishop down to e2. We see bishop to a4. King comes to g2. We see king to e7. We got bishop to d3. We got king to e6. King coming to f3. So, you know, we're in an endgame. So both players are like, hey, man, I'm going to go ahead and start trying to move my pieces up and, you know, try to get established up here. So knight comes down to d2 with check. And we have king to g3. And as far as the computer is concerned, they're registering this position as dead drawn. They literally give triple zeros for this position. It's really interesting. I mean, because it just seems like to a human, there's a lot of life in the position. It's like, nah, man, it can't be drawn. The computer's like, nah, man, it's triple zeros. Like, it's like, all right. So we see knight over to c4. And this is the point in the game where things actually start to kind of shift over into white's favor. Because we are now allowing the king to try to penetrate into the position with king to h4. You know, they're looking at this juicy h pawn over here. So the bishop comes back to e8. We see king to g5. Bishop comes to g6 just in time to defend. We do see a4 because, as you guys saw, you know, that pawn was under attack. So after a4, we see knight down to d2. We see king up to h6. And that king is just like really nestled in there now. For white. So we see knight over to f3. We see bishop down to f2. We see knight down to d2. We see h4. You know, we're like steadily trying to work on pushing this pawn up so that we can knock this bishop away and collect us a nice juicy pawn. So we do see knight coming to e4. We see bishop down to e3. Now the position is, it's a little bit locked in the center, but it is actually more beneficial for bishops because at some point these pawns are probably going to come in contact with each other and this whole side of the board is going to open up. So as white, you definitely do want to preserve your bishop pair. We see knight to c3. We see a5. We got knight over to a2. And before I go any further, I have two different guess the move situations, and this is the first one. There is a certain idea, a concept in end-games that maybe some of you guys might be familiar with, or maybe you guys can learn right now. And there is a like fire move in the position. It is very in-game technique, and it is just screaming to be played. So if you want to go ahead and stop the video and see what that move is, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So you guys hear me talk all the time about minor pieces, right? As far as like knights and bishops are concerned. So there is actually a move in the position where as white, you can completely dominate this knight that is over here. And that move, if you guessed it, congratulations, you got some nice in-game experience, is actually bishop to d2. Now, it might look kind of funny, but what bishop d2 is doing is it is completely dominating this knight. So all of the points where the knight would try to hop out of the rim are completely covered by this bishop. Sometimes, especially just to be a little bit more visual, if this knight was actually up here on a3, you would see that this bishop would actually be controlling it completely because it would not be able to jump to any of these squares. So this is one of the ideas that you get when you start to study in games, how a bishop can control a knight. And in this particular position, you are just so overwhelmingly completely won that it's insane after bishop to d2, because this knight is truly grim on the rim. And that is one of the situations that, you know, really speaks to a knight being on the rim is really, really bad. So that actually was not what was played in the game. The very natural h5 was played in the game. It's just clear, the clear intent of knocking this bishop away so that you can gather this pawn. That is just literally what you're wanting to do. So after h5, we do see bishop to e8. We see pawn takes b6, pawn takes b6. We got king down to g5. We see h6, king. You know, we were threatening bishop takes with check here, so you know something has to give. So h6 gives. We see knight taking b4, and now you see that that knight was able to get out of the rim. Now it is completely lost for black anyway, so it doesn't really too much matter. But there are some situations where that bishop move might make a difference in the game. You know, dominating that knight like, you know, you're able to. So we got bishop down to e2. We see b5. We got king up to g7. We see bishop takes h5, bishop takes h5. We see knight down to c2, and we do have a very it's a kind of threat of this pawn coming down and trying to promote. It's actually not something that can actually happen, but it can look kind of scary. So we got bishop up to f7 with check. We see king to d7. We see e6 with check. King comes down to d6, trying to make his way over here to this queen side so we can try to usher this pawn in. And this is the next position that we have, where there is a monstrous move, and it's just completely like almost mating, is as crazy as this move is. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video a second time and see if you can find this video, which actually was, or if you can find the move which actually was played in the game, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So for those of you that noticed that this pawn is like literally 2 steps away, and there is a way to draw this king further away from this pawn, you would have found the bishop to c5. And this is just an exclam. Like, this is just super accurate play at this point by Wesley. So, and he literally puts the bishop in the king's face. You can do it with the bishop. You can do it with the queen. You can do it with the rook, with the pawn. Literally every single piece on the board you can do this with. So this is a deflection tactic, because you do not want this king to influence the square. So now the bishop, if the king does step away, this pawn is going to be pushing home with the support of this bishop, and there's nothing you can do about it. So this is a really crummy position to be in. So, Maxime just goes ahead and takes on c5, and we see e7, and it is in this position that Maxime does resign the game, because as you can see, there's just nothing left to do. You're going to get a queen, and then you're going to come down and you're going to, you're just going to cause all kinds of havoc. You got a bishop and a queen, and your opponent is 4 steps away from getting a queen themselves. So it's just overwhelming. And Maxime Vachier-Lagrave did understand that, so he resigned the game. So that is that game. And I've already talked too much already, so I apologize, guys. I don't usually make videos 17, 18 minutes long, but I will try to snap on these good mornings real quick, and then I'll be getting up out of here. So maanyong buntag, mayad na agahan, nainbag na bigat, masantos ya kapason, marhe na aga, maanyong aga, mapia na uma, kapia na kapano dios, mayap a abak, mayad na aga, mapia agay, mapia kapapita, my big abukla, maraja na buntag, maria mainat, maupe na aga, kasan yangan si lub, assalamu alaikum, merci beaucoup, and salam to you. First time I got through all of them, like, just immediately went through. I appreciate you guys very much, and I'll see y'all next time.